What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino, in this dialogue-intense sports drama, starring Zendaya as the power-hungry, egocentric Tashi Duncan, Art, who is this meek, shy, submissive, but talented tennis star played by Mike Feist, and the turbulent anarchist excellently played by Josh O'Connor. This movie on the surface is about how these two friends, Art and Patrick, who are promising young tennis stars, go through different phases in their lives, having known each other from the age of 12, and see different stages of their friendship as they grow older, which includes the interjection of Zendaya's character, as the movie kind of tests the limits of the durability of their friendship with many different trials. Right from the start, this movie does a really great job of balancing the characters' screen time, and to be candid, I didn't really get all the nuanced scenes of eye candy that was clearly meant for tennis fans, but it still did a great job of keeping you engaged even if you aren't a fan of the sport. And you can also tell they had a lot of fun with the editing and the cinematography. There is a lot, and I mean a lot, of variance in the angles of the matches that are being played throughout the movie, and as neat of a touch as that was, I would have liked them to reel it in a little bit because a lot of the screen time is devoted to these matches, and that was the part that I was least interested in, especially when considering the fact that the movie is over 2 hours long. And really the only other major complaint I had about this movie was the time jumping. It felt exhausting trying to keep up with it, and like, I understand it may be intentional of going back and forth like a tennis match would feel like, but it still was a bit draining and just really wasn't my cup of tea. Maybe just cut down a little bit on these things, as there is a lot of dialogue in this movie, you know? But outside of that, I really enjoyed a lot of this movie. The writing was sharp, fast, and witty. This movie is also very homoerotic and sex positive, and it was really cool to see how those elements elevated certain aspects of the film. In particular, the second half of the movie really had a lot of sharp writing, namely the back alley scene between Zendaya's character and Patrick, and the sauna room scene between Patrick and Art. Honestly, the dynamic between these characters was always fun to watch, and it was really cool to see all the interesting perspectives and MOs that each of these characters had. And that's another thing. All three of these characters are flawed and have issues, but that's a good thing. These characters are all morally challenged and in the gray line constantly instead of just being black and white. They feel like real people that I would have believed based on what we've already seen from them. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I definitely have a preference. For starters, I thought Patrick was delightfully disturbed and a cocky jackass, but he was always aware of this, and whether it was karma or not, his life didn't really pan out how he'd wanted it to. In present day, we're shown how he's so broke he has to sleep in his car because he can't afford a hotel room and is banking on winning the tournament just to make ends meet. There's a really pointedly powerful statement in one of my favorite scenes of the movie where Patrick and Art are in the sauna room, and basically Art says something along the lines of, "I'm just visiting, but this is where you live." And you can tell how much that infuriates Patrick, because you can tell that in reality, Art is just doing this to gain momentum or whatever, to get back into winning form, because he has his eyes set on something bigger, a bigger tournament. So he views the challenge as just some stepping stool, unlike Patrick, who really is depending on the money of this tournament. And even more so this applies to him because earlier in the film, Zendaya criticizes Patrick because he relies too much on his raw talent and doesn't seek to improve, because like in the real world, you can't rely on just raw talent. It has to be in combination with work ethic. Next is Zendaya's character, and she's probably the most corrupt of the three, and I think the movie makes it very obvious that that's the case. Unlike Patrick, who is self-aware enough to know what kind of person he is, she really can't say the same. She has this veneer of being this put-together trainer because of her injury, which was very visceral. She ultimately ends up chasing Art and pretty much seducing him into letting her be his trainer, and more importantly, controller of his life. But she has this broken moral compass because she constantly shows how eager she is on bettering Art in tennis, even when from the start of the film, you can see how much less motivated he is in becoming an all-star as opposed to how much she wants to make him an all-star. The movie pointedly also shows how she even neglects her family, because we see how the daughter, when wanting to spend time with her mother, says that she just always focused on tennis and voluntarily avoids spending time with her. It's almost like she's afraid of settling or accepting this to be enough. The money, the perfect husband, a daughter, and it's just not enough for her. But the worst part about it is that she loves control and basically has all but complete control of Art and his career, and this movie makes it obvious that she gets bored of him, and that why she constantly gravitates towards Patrick because what? damage attracts damaged, I find that to be so dumb. She ultimately finds the perfect way to get what she wants by essentially covering up the fact that she wants to sleep with Patrick again by using it as bribe to say, okay, if I sleep with you, please let Art win. But the true icing on the cake is that when she goes back to the hotel room and finds Art sleeping with their daughter, you can tell how much remorse she has, but at the same time not really, because she doesn't ever admit what she did. But I should say Zendaya did amazing playing this role. She made this character so remarkable, and she made every scene undeniably strong with her character. And lastly, we have Art, who is probably my least favorite character in the film, just because he felt like the little brother to Patrick. And despite the fact that he constantly, or at least overall, outshined Patrick, it still always felt like he was inferior to him. With the exception of the sauna scene, because that really showed how much he grew as a character, and it was a really powerful moment for him, because truthfully, up until this point, Patrick had shown how easy it was, or how good he was at manipulating Art and dominating him. But here he basically said, yeah, maybe I can't beat you at tennis, and maybe there's other players that win more often, but in moments that really matter, I always win. And by those standards, Art had completely outclassed Patrick. There's the class and money battle where Art is this super wealthy man who could literally quit today and just rely on foundation work to live off for the rest of his life, while Patrick has to work for the rest of the foreseeable future. Also, Patrick might be able to seduce Tashi, but ultimately Art married her and has a family with her, something that Patrick doesn't have, because even he himself has said how no girl has ever wanted marriage with him. But in spite of this one really great scene, I just can't really like Art's character. He's just too timid. He's essentially afraid of Tashi, as there's this running line before he says anything of saying, "This might get you mad," but almost apologetically, like he's gonna get in trouble. And his thesis statement of who wouldn't love you, he takes it way too extreme. He knew about the cheating, and just overall, if he didn't want to continue to play, he should have just called it. No wonder he was already on a slump. He was clinging on to a fire that wasn't there anymore. I just think overall, Tashi was too strong and too dominant for Art for that dynamic to really work. But ultimately, I really did like the ending of how these two guys who could quite literally ghost each other for many years still know each other to the point where they can communicate things that were foreshadowed long before and get a point across in the same way. Because ultimately, that's how Art ends up finding out that Tashi cheated on him. Because Patrick mirrored Art's stance, and earlier in the film we were told that that was a sign of whether he slept with her or not. And if he did the same stance, then he did sleep with her. This movie was overall very interesting because it felt very much like commentary and almost an analysis on male insecurities. Some of the more prominent examples I felt included things along the like of who has better game with girls, who's got more money, who's better at sports, who's more alpha. And because for most of these, Art is subjected to be the weaker one, it made his character feel a lot more frailer and just generally lame for most of the movie. Overall, I enjoyed this film and I didn't really get into it, but the music hit the nail on the head. As for the upbeat and faster scenes, the music felt cool with its synthy, sporty edge that you'd expect. And this might just be a me thing, but I found a lot of similarities with this movie and the book Carrie Soto is Back, which just made the experience a bit more fun. Not to confuse the storylines, more so the personalities between Carrie and Tashi respectively. It was also cool to see that Guadagnino had worked on Bones and All and the remake for Suspiria, which were both fine films, at least in my opinion. But that's pretty much it for me. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.